The financial support for this trip came from the savings of my mother-in-law, which was intended to be Henry's future inheritance. My brother and his wife hurried over right after my mother's death, not to express sympathy, but to secure her bank book and withdraw her savings before her death could be officially reported to the government. Confronting Olivia about using my mother's money, I managed to keep my composure despite my frustration when she nonchalantly admitted they had spent around $20,000 on their vacation. The sheer nerve of my brother and his wife, who secretly used my mother's money without any permission, initially infuriated me. However, I soon realized they were oblivious to a crucial fact, and this brought a spontaneous laugh. Olivia was baffled by my laughter, wondering if the shock had driven me mad. Far from it. I was simply struck by the humor in anticipating their shock upon discovering the actual situation and the consequences that awaited them. Their carefree days were undoubtedly limited. I am Ava, an average office manager raised by benevolent parents. They were the embodiment of kindness, always pondering how they could assist others. Their altruism sometimes made them targets for deceit or placed undue burdens on them. But their integrity remained inspirational to me. However, my brother Henry was a stark contrast to them. His outlook was consistently self-serving, and he found our parents' selflessness baffling. As Henry grew, so did his disdain for our parents' generosity. In high school, he started to pressure them for more money, arguing that if they could afford to help others, they could increase his allowance. Despite Henry's challenging demeanor, our parents never deviated from their values, which only deepened his resentment. In college, Henry exploited our parents' support to finance his education, which he squandered on excessive partying, eventually leading to his academic failure. He held the belief that parents should prioritize their children above all else, or were they only capable of showing kindness to strangers? Henry always had a way of justifying his self-centered actions. I remember overhearing him boast to his friends about how easy it was to fool our parents, chuckling about their naivety. After college, Henry moved out abruptly, yet he frequently returned, complaining that his initial earnings were insufficient for a decent life. Despite his independence, he kept coming back to our parents for financial help. Worried about Henry but wanting to assist him, our parents continued to provide whatever he asked for. When I secured a job, I chose to support our parents financially, taking on some of the burden Henry had left behind. Although they insisted that I should use my earnings as I saw fit, I felt compelled to help them and regularly contributed to their household, treating it like just another bill to pay. This arrangement went on for years, with Henry only appearing when he needed money. However, one day, he unexpectedly invited me and our parents to dine out. At the restaurant, a charming woman was seated next to him. Henry introduced her with a smile. "Dad, Mom, Ava, this is Olivia, my girlfriend." He announced they were getting married and hoped for our support, which I initially thought meant moral backing. But Henry had other ideas. He wanted our parents to finance his wedding and new home. Knowing our parents' difficulty in denying help, Henry persuaded them to pay for all his upcoming expenses. After the wedding and the home purchase, Henry's demands didn't stop, and Olivia, now his wife, quickly adapted to a lavish lifestyle funded by our parents. Unfortunately, this way of living was short-lived. Our father's health began to fail, leading to expensive hospital stays. Concerned for our parents' financial well-being in retirement, I suggested to Henry that we should share the costs of our father's medical care. I reminded him of all the support we had both received over the years. Yet, Henry refused, coldly arguing that our father's health issues were his own fault for not taking better care of himself while being overly generous with others. Following this conversation, Henry ceased visiting our parents' home entirely, and neither he nor Olivia showed any concern for our father's well-being during his hospitalization. During the time our father was in the hospital, my mother and I were his primary caregivers. Despite our efforts, he sadly passed away. We informed Henry and Olivia of his death, but their help with the funeral arrangements was non-existent. They attended the service, yet their brief appearance and lack of interaction with the family did not go unnoticed. Our relatives viewed them with clear disdain, though it seemed to affect them little. The funeral took its toll on my mother. She had stood strong as the chief mourner, but afterwards, Her vitality began to wane, deeply affected by the loss of my father. Concerned, I reached out to Henry, hoping he would offer some comfort. "Mom's been feeling down. Could you visit her sometimes?" His response was disheartening instead of concern. He inquired about our father's inheritance. "By the way, what happened to Dad's inheritance?" "It all went to Mom. They decided that while Dad was still alive." Sensing his motives, I immediately cautioned him, "Mom is really fragile right now. Please don't try to take advantage of her. Just come and provide some support. What's the point of visiting if there's no money in it for me?" "It's not worth my time," Henry retorted. True to his word, he never came by. Half a year after our father's death, our mother passed away too. Despite knowing her frail condition, Henry showed no concern. Upon hearing of her death, he quickly returned to our parents' house. I hoped he would assume his responsibilities as the eldest son at the funeral, but both he and Olivia vanished as the service began. My attempts to reach him were met with voicemail. Ultimately, I had to step up as the chief mourner and see the funeral through. Days later, when I finally reached Henry's phone, Olivia answered. "Ava, Henry's busy with boarding procedures and can't come to the phone." "Boarding procedures?" "Olivia, where are you?" "We're at JFK Airport, leaving the United States in a few hours, LOL. "So you're leaving the country?" "Yes, we're off on an international trip," she replied nonchalantly, as if their departure was just another trivial excursion. I was taken aback by my brother and his wife's decision to go on an international trip immediately following our mother's death. However, Olivia's next revelation was even more jarring. She laughed. "We're really thankful to your mother-in-law. Thanks to her, we're enjoying this luxurious trip." Confused, I asked, "What do you mean by that?" "Well, we used the savings from our mother-in-law for this trip. It was going to be Henry's inheritance eventually, so we took it from Mom's savings." Shocked, I pressed on, "How did you manage to get that money?" "When we visited her house, we borrowed her bank book and SIL, Olivia explained. "We knew we couldn't withdraw the money once the death certificate was submitted, so we acted quickly." Their prompt visit after our mother's death was not to mourn but to secure her bank book and withdraw her savings before I could submit her death certificate. Trying to contain my anger, I asked, "So you used Mom's money?" Olivia nonchalantly confirmed, "Yes, we already spent $20,000 on trip expenses. It's a good thing Henry's plan worked out." For a moment, fury at their audacity for using our mom's money without permission consumed me. But then I remembered something crucial. They were oblivious to an important detail. I couldn't help but burst into laughter, thinking, serves you right. Confused by my reaction, Olivia asked, "What's wrong with you? Did the shock of us using the money make you lose your mind?" Still laughing, I responded, "Sure, that's fine. I'll give up my share of the inheritance so Henry can have it all." "That was your plan all along, right?" Pleased, Olivia said. "Oh, you're quite understanding, huh? By the way, please make sure to arrange for all of Mama's mail to be sent to your house from now on." "Don't worry, it's a simple task. I'll let Henry know." She hung up cheerfully. I didn't hear from my brother again until they returned from their trip. "Ava, Olivia told me you're giving up your inheritance." "Yes, but more importantly, did you handle the mail forwarding for Mom's mail?" "Yeah, I took care of it as soon as we got back." "Good to know you're not going to change your mind later, are you? You won't say you should have inherited after all?" "Of course not. I still believe my decision was the right one." "Well, it's only right that I, the eldest son, inherit everything," Henry said, ending the call cheerfully. However, a few weeks later, he called again, sounding panicked. "There's a collection notice addressed to Mom in her mail." "What's this about?" The call from my brother took an unexpected turn when he asked about a collection notice. "Is it from the bank?" I questioned. Our parents had always been incredibly generous, often going to great lengths to help others. This included financial matters. If someone needed a loan, they wouldn't hesitate to borrow from the bank themselves to lend it out, or even act as a guarantor. As a result, their debt steadily increased, ultimately surpassing their savings by a significant margin. "Did you know about this?" Henry's voice escalated in frustration. You knew Mom had debt, right? Why didn't you say anything? There was no point, I replied calmly. You were going to find out eventually. You knew about the debt, which is why you renounced your inheritance, right? If I had known, I would have done the same. That's impossible, Henry exclaimed, bewildered. Why is it impossible, Henry? You took money from Mom's bank account for your vacation, didn't you? So what? What does that have to do with the inheritance? It has everything to do with it. What you did is considered a legal acceptance of the inheritance, I explained. The concept seemed to baffle him. Explain it so I can understand, he demanded. I patiently explained to Henry that by withdrawing money from our deceased mother's bank account for personal use before the inheritance proceedings, he had legally accepted the inheritance. This was a standard legal principle, though perhaps not commonly discussed in everyday situations. I've never heard of such a thing, Henry argued, skepticism in his voice. Of course, you haven't. Not many people would think to use a deceased family member's savings for personal gain, so it's not a common topic, I countered. You're just making this up because you want the inheritance for yourself. I have a lawyer friend, you know? They'll find out if you're lying. Henry hung up abruptly. After consulting his lawyer friend, Henry called back, his tone devoid of its previous confidence. Ava, you were right. I can't renounce the inheritance now. It seemed the lawyer had confirmed what I had told him. Finally, Henry had to face the reality that he had inherited not only the assets but also the substantial debts of our parents. He had always been eager to accept money from them, never considering the financial strain he was contributing to behind the scenes. Now, desperate to find a way out of repaying the debt and with no savings to speak of due to their lavish spending habits, Henry was in a predicament. In a last-ditch effort to alleviate his financial burden, he tried to appeal to familial ties. Hey, Ava, our parents are gone, and it's just us now, right? Isn't this the time to join forces? What do you mean by that? I asked, wary of his intentions. When Henry approached me with the idea of collaborating to settle our parents' debts, he framed it as an act of filial duty, urging me to set aside the inheritance issues and help him with half of the debt. I couldn't help but sigh deeply at his proposal, which felt both selfish and far too late. What are you talking about? When Dad was in the hospital, I suggested we should support our parents together. But you pushed me away, claiming you were too busy, I reminded him. Henry's excuses fell flat. No matter how busy you claimed to be, you never once visited Dad in the hospital, nor did you support our grieving mother afterward. I can't take hearing about filial piety from you. With nothing more to say, I left Henry to ponder his actions. Have you ever genuinely done anything for someone else, Henry? You exploited our kind parents, but there's no one left to help someone who has never helped others. But if you don't help me, Olivia and I can't manage the debt on our own. Are you going to abandon your own brother? We're family, he pleaded. When Dad was sick, you abandoned him, claiming his poor health was his own fault. Now, the situation with Mom's savings, it's your fault. You say you regret it, but have you really changed? Or are you just desperate to lessen your own burden? Even if you have changed, the person you should be apologizing to isn't here anymore. It's too late, I responded sternly. I ended the call with Henry and decided then and there not to assist him. He had caused enough grief for our parents over the years. Subsequently, burdened by debt and unable to maintain their once carefree lifestyle, Henry and Olivia's relationship began to deteriorate. Despite the impracticality of living separately due to financial constraints, their marriage persisted, filled with constant arguments. Initially, they attempted to cut costs and gradually pay down the debt with their salaries, but their efforts were short-lived. Neither Henry nor Olivia could forsake their lavish spending habits, often splurging in secret, which prevented any real progress in reducing their debt. As they blamed each other for their ongoing financial woes, their relationship suffered even more. Meanwhile, I found peace in properly mourning our parents. I recalled the funeral where countless attendees tearfully expressed their gratitude for the kindness and support my parents had extended to them throughout their lives. This memory solidified my resolve to honor their legacy in my own actions, far removed from the turmoil Henry had chosen. Realizing the extent to which our parents had assisted so many in need filled me with immense pride. It was an ironic twist of fate that my brother, who had rarely shown appreciation and frequently troubled our parents, was now burdened with the very debt accumulated from their generosity. Despite the financial struggles they faced, I continued to admire how our parents never hesitated to help others. Holding these thoughts close, I made it a daily ritual to honor their memory and their unyielding spirit of kindness by paying respects at the family altar. This daily act of remembrance served not only as a tribute to their lives, but also as a personal reaffirmation of the values they had instilled in me.